Two men who spend most of their lives being feared spend one afternoon lost in the woods, and by nightfall, they're arguing over whether to eat snow. No one's afraid of them out here. That's not a coincidence. That's the entire argument this episode is making, if you're willing to look past the jokes. It's easy to watch this episode purely for the comedy, or get pulled into the decades-long fan obsession with what actually happened to the Russian. Both are fair reasons to love it, but structurally, Barrens is doing something sharper than a bottle episode, built around a missing person. It's a controlled experiment. Take two men the show has spent 3 seasons establishing as dangerous, remove every piece of infrastructure that makes them dangerous, and watch what's actually left. Because in their normal environment, Christopher and Paulie are apex predators, not because of anything innate to them individually, because of the machine around them. The suits signal legitimacy. The guns signal consequence. The crew signals backup. Every person they intimidate in North Jersey already knows what happens if they don't comply, because that knowledge has been built deliberately over decades by people before them. Strip all of that away. Take away the network, the reputation, the home turf, and what's left is 2 guys with a gun neither of them can currently use effectively, no idea how to start a fire, and no one around who's ever heard of them. Notice how low stakes this starts. Silvio's home sick with the flu, so Tony just hands the job to whoever's around. This isn't an important piece of work. It's an afternoon errand, made men doing scut work because the guy who usually does it has a cold. The entire disaster that follows happens because Paulie can't let a joke land on him without escalating. He needles Valerie over rubles, over Russian bathroom habits. Small, unnecessary jabs at a guy who's already just handed over the money he owed. Valerie snaps back. Paulie throws the first real blow. Christopher actually tries to talk him down before getting pulled into the fight himself. This is worth sitting on for a second because it's the whole engine of what follows. Nothing about this fight was necessary. It's not business. It's ego with nowhere else to go. Because in their world, ego rarely gets meaningfully punished. Paulie's used to being the loudest guy in a room where the room already fears him. Paulie chokes Valerie with a floor lamp, hard enough that they're convinced he's dead. Panic sets in, but not moral panic. Logistical panic. They wrap him in a rug, load him into the trunk, and Paulie, without missing a beat, decides the Barrens is actually a decent option. Since it's 20 minutes from Atlantic City, they can dump the body and still make it to a blackjack table. Except Valerie isn't dead. He's alive in the trunk, and alive enough that by the time they open it in the woods, he's already chewed through the duct tape. They hand him a shovel, tell him to dig his own grave, and that's the moment the entire balance of power in this episode flips. Because it turns out the guy they've been casually beating up and threatening to bury is a former Russian Interior Ministry commando, credited, according to Tony, relayed over a garbled cell connection, with killing 16 Chechen rebels during the war in Chechnya. Paulie doesn't even get the information right. He repeats it back to Christopher as Valerie having been an interior decorator who killed 16 Czechoslovakians. It's one of the funniest lines in the whole series, but it's also quietly the entire thesis in miniature. These two didn't just underestimate the man in front of them. They don't even have the vocabulary to correctly understand what he actually was. From here, the episode strips them down piece by piece. They chase Valerie, lose him, and in a moment of pure adrenaline and incompetence, shoot at movement in the brush and kill a deer instead. It's played for laughs, but look at what it actually shows. 2 armed men who can't hit the one target that matters and instead take out something defenseless that was never a threat at all. Night falls, the temperature drops, and Paulie loses a shoe trudging through the snow. There's no crew to call in, no reputation that means anything to the cold. They find an abandoned van and take shelter in it. And this is where the show lets the mask slip completely. 2 men who project total control in every other context, reduced to squabbling like children, blaming each other, briefly coming to blows again, purely because they're frightened and have no other outlet for it. These are men who, on a normal week, get comped veal at Nuovo Vesuvio just for walking through the door. Here, dinner is frozen ketchup and relish packets scavenged from an old fast food bag, plus a handful of stray Tic Tacs Paulie finds in his own pocket and refuses to share, while Christopher fumes because he skipped breakfast that morning. It's a small, almost childish image, and that's exactly why it lands. Status doesn't survive the trip out here. It doesn't even survive dinner. Somewhere in the middle of that night, Paulie manages to get a signal and reaches Tony. And Tony's response says almost everything you need to know about the actual hierarchy of competence in this show. He doesn't come alone. He brings Bobby Baccalieri, specifically because Bobby's an experienced outdoorsman. And the first thing Tony does when he sees Bobby dressed for the woods, hunting jacket, the whole outfit, is laugh at him. It looks ridiculous to him. That's not a costume Tony recognizes as powerful. Bobby is, within the culture of this crew, kind of a joke. Soft, domestic, the guy who gets teased for being under his wife's thumb, nowhere near as feared as Paulie or as favored as Christopher. But by the time they're actually driving out to search, Tony's already apologizing to him for the laugh, because Bobby turns out to be the only person in the entire episode who's actually competent in the environment they're all standing in. He's the only one with peace of mind on the whole trip. That's the show quietly proving its own point twice over. Toughness, as this crew defines it, volume, violence, the willingness to hurt somebody over an insult, has nothing to do with actual capability. It's a costume, and a costume only works on the stage it was built for. Take it to the wrong stage, and the guy who looked like a joke back home turns out to be the only one dressed correctly. Even the ending refuses to hand anyone a redemption. When Tony and Bobby reach the meeting spot, Paulie's car is simply gone, and Silvio's $5,000 was in it. The one job they were actually sent to do, and they can't even confirm it got done. Nobody ever finds out what happened to the car, same as nobody ever finds out what happened to Valeri. Paulie lies to Tony about how the fight started, and Christopher backs the lie. There's no lesson absorbed, no growth. A few episodes later, they're right back to sniping at each other like nothing happened. That's the real punchline of Pine Barrens, underneath the comedy and the decades of fan theorizing about a Russian who never turns back up. Take Paulie and Christopher out of the ecosystem that manufactures their power. The suits, the guns, the reputation, the guaranteed compliance of everyone around them. And what's left isn't dangerous. It's two cold, hungry, incompetent men, kept alive not by their own toughness, but by Bobby Baccalieri, the one guy nobody ever bothered to be afraid of.